Well, Boker Tov from here in America. I know it's not morning there in Eretz Yisrael, and I just wanted to begin by thanking you for giving me this really remarkable and fantastic opportunity. I first became acquainted with the yeshiva approximately 3 years ago when my son Sam began at Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh. Really, believe it or not, sight unseen. I admit that if you would have asked me 5 years ago what Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh was, I wouldn't even be able to tell you anything about it. But 3 years ago, we had the amazing good fortune and siyata d'shmaya to become acquainted with the yeshiva. We were introduced to the world of Netiv Aryeh, to the Rosh Yeshiva, to Rav Bina, to Rav Shaloni, to Rav Ron. And the experience for the last 2 years, has really been nothing short of remarkable for both myself and my wife. A few months ago, I had the good fortune of spending a few days in the yeshiva. I came to visit, and really that time had a profound effect on me. Since that time, I've wanted to figure out a way that I can express my Hakaras HaTov. And then, as I guess we could say, as luck would have it, Corona hit, and the yeshiva went on Zoom, and the boys came home, and my son Josh, who's now enrolled in the yeshiva, came back to America. And then Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh and Rav Mays and his shir was in my house. And I began to really appreciate the yeshiva. And therefore, again, this is a very a significant honor for me to be able to address the Bnei Yeshiva, the Talmidim, the Hanhala, and all of the Messiahim in connection with this great simcha. Zoom or no Zoom, a Siyum is really represents much more than just the completion of a Masechta. It represents an achievement that many of us may not even understand, may not even understand it on the level that a Siyum occurs. We know that a Siyum merits a Kaddish. We know that it negates the Tainus B'chorim. That's how powerful it can be on Erev Pesach. It negates Tainus B'chorim. During the 9 days, if we make a siyum, we can eat steak and shawarma. We don't have to eat pizza and tuna fish. There's a power there. It serves as an aliyah to a neshama if it's done on a shloshim or if it's done for a yard site. There's a significant power to this achievement, and it really gives me great pride. And of course, I know I speak on behalf of all of the parents when I say it gives us a special Yiddish nachas that it's our sons, our boys, if you will, that are involved in this unbelievable milestone and have accomplished, have come to this great achievement. So to that end, I say Mazel Tov on this great accomplishment. Now, when Rav Hanan called me last week and asked me if I would speak here, he really only gave me one rule. He said, please see what you can do. You're going to come on at about, you're going to come on towards the beginning of everything. He says, please try and wrap it up by about 11:20, 11:25. So what he didn't realize is that here in St. Louis, it's right now 10:15. So given the fact that I have an hour to express my thoughts here today, Rav Hanan, we should have no problem fitting everything into your time frame. And then, of course, when my son Josh, when he heard I was speaking, he also gave me one rule. He said, please, please, please don't embarrass me. So to that, I just say, Joshi, Bubala, Tatala Shinings, you know I'm not going to embarrass you. Now, I know you don't want to sit next to me as I'm speaking, but I see you down there on the Zoom. You have a little schmutzy on your face, Niskait. You have a little schmutzy, but don't worry, I promise you, I won't embarrass you. And Reb Hanan, I will finish before 11:30. Bershus, the Rosh Yeshiva, the parents, the Hanhala, the Rabbanim, the Rabbeim, the Talmidim, I want to tell the following story. And normally when I tell a story, my kids will roll their eyes and say, oh boy, here comes fake news. But this, I assure you, the story I'm about to tell you is largely based on a true story. Several years ago, I had the great zchus to be in Eretz Yisrael, and I had the great zchus to meet with Rav David Cohn, the Chevroner Rosh Yeshiva. And I met with him in his apartment. And when I met with him, he presented me with the following question. He said, we all know the famous medrash that before Hashem gave the Torah to Bnei Israel, he offered it to the other Umos HaOlam. And they all rejected it. And as the medrash tells us, first, HaKadosh Baruch Hu offered the Torah to our cousins, our very dear cousins, the Bnei Esav. And the Bnei Esav, as the medrash says, said to Hashem, Kavayachol, what does it say in this Torah? And Hashem says, it says, Lo sirtzach, thou shalt not murder. And Bnei Esav said, that's not us. We live by the sword. We can't accept a Torah that says, thou shalt not murder. So Hashem moves on, and Hashem goes to other cousins of ours, the Bnei Ammon and the Bnei Moab. And the Bnei Ammon and Bnei Moab say, what is this Torah of yours? What does it say? Before we accept it, we want to know what it says. And Hashem says, it says, Lo sina, Lo sachmod, you shall not commit adultery. And the Bnei Ammon and the Bnei Moab, they say, we can't accept that. Being immoral, that's in our blood, that's in our DNA. We can't accept it, no thank you. And then finally, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings the Torah to Bnei Yishmael, other cousins. Wonderful mishpacha we have, right? He brings it to the Bnei Yishmael. And they say, what does it say in your Torah? And Hashem says, Lo sigzol. It says, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not loot. And they say, no, we can't accept that. That's part of our culture. Taking that which isn't ours is part of our culture. And then, of course, Hashem brings the Torah to Bnei Yisrael, and Bnei Yisrael says, Na'aseh v'nishma. So it says Rav David Cohn, he turns to me on that day, and he says to me, how can it be? How can it be that the Umos HaOlam rejected the Torah for the laws of thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery? How could that be? It doesn't make sense. A society that doesn't have rules, a society that doesn't have law and order can't survive. You think that these nations don't have these rules? That they don't have a rule of thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal? It doesn't make any sense. How could they have rejected the Torah based upon those commandments? And he asked me this question, and of course, I didn't know an answer. I probably was still trying to translate the Ivrit in my head from what he had said 10 minutes earlier, but I didn't have an answer. So he turned to me and he told me the following. He says, of course, the nations of the world have law and order, and they have these rules. Oh, I just lost you.
No, you're still.
Oh, okay. Of course, the nations of the world have these rules, but it's not about following the rules. Of course, they follow the rules. They won't have a society if they don't follow the rules. What they didn't realize, or what they didn't accept, was the fact that these rules, these commandments, these mitzvos, they make us better people. That's what they didn't want in their life. They did not want to take these mitzvot. They did not want to take the Torah and make themselves better people. And that's what they rejected. A very nice vart, of course, comes from the Chevroner Rosh Yeshiva. It's a gem. I have to take it with me. But it didn't sit well because I didn't understand how. How does this happen? How is it that Torah, mitzvos, how does it make us better people? And then a few weeks after my trip to Eretz Yisrael several years ago, a remarkable thing happened to me. For years, well, for those that don't know me, by the way, I'm an attorney. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and I spend a lot of time in court. And for years, I would walk into the courthouse in downtown St. Louis, and there was a homeless man who sat on a bench right outside the courthouse. And he was your typical homeless man like you would see in any downtown city. He was dirty, his clothes were dirty, he was unshaven, he had, his hair was big and bushy. Typical homeless individual, but a very pleasant individual. And every morning I would walk in and he'd always say good morning to me. And I'd walk out and he'd say, have a nice day. If I had a few dollars, that was before tuition, so I had a few dollars, I would give him $1 or $2. If I had, when my wife used to make me lunch, if I had an apple or something, I would give him an apple or some food or a bag of chips, a can of soda if I had it. And it was just a guy who was there. Every day I would see him there. And then one day he was gone. And then one day he was gone. And I didn't think too much of it. I figured maybe he found another building. I don't know what happened. But that was it. Life went on. And then a few months later, this was after my trip to Eretz Yisrael, I'm sitting in a Starbucks downtown St. Louis near the courthouse. And a man walks in to the Starbucks, and I'm just sitting there on my phone. And he looks at me, he comes over to me and he says, "You're a lawyer, right?" And I said, "Yes." And he said to me, "Would you be able to look at this contract that I have on buying a house?" So I said, I don't do that type of law. I'm sorry, I could give you the name of somebody, but I don't do that type of law. And then I said to him, "How do you know that I'm an attorney?" And he said to me, I used to see you every day walking in and out of the courthouse over there across the street. And you used to always help me out. You'd give me $1, you'd give me something to eat or something like that. And I looked a little closer and I realized that this was the man. This was the homeless individual that used to sit there that I used to see almost every day. But today I see him, he's clean shaven, he's dressed neatly, he's got on nice clothes, and he's presenting me a contract to buy a house. And he wants me to look it over. So I said to him, "Sir," I said, "what happened? The last time I saw you, you seemed a lot more down on your luck. Tell me what exactly happened." So he told me the following story. He said, "You know how you used to give me $1 or $2 or some food?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, a lot of people used to do that." And he said, "One day I was sitting out there and a woman came over to me and she gave me a box with a brand new pair of shoes in the box. And she said some story about how her husband bought them and they weren't the right size and she couldn't return them. So she just gave me the shoes and I opened them up and they were really nice shoes and they just happened to be my size. So I took off my old shoes, my torn shoes, I threw them away. I put on these shoes and I started to make my way through the city. And I look down as I'm walking and I see these really nice shoes. But at the same time, I see that I'm wearing these torn and dirty pants. And it didn't match. And so I had a few dollars in my pocket. So I went over to the Goodwill, to the Salvation Army, and I bought the nicest pair of pants that they had in my size for the money that I had. And I wore the pair of pants. And now the pants matched the shoes, but the rest didn't fit. And so a few days later, I managed to put together enough money to buy a nice shirt. And then I got a haircut and then I shaved because it all had to match. And then I got a job and things have been going pretty well for me. I got a small apartment and I've been able to put away enough money to buy a house. Truly, truly a remarkable story, a feel-good story, if you will. And I walked out of Starbucks that day and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Reb David Cohen's message hit me like a ton of bricks. This is what it means. This is what it means when Rav David Cohen told me that Torah makes you a better person. You learn a little Torah and it changes you a little bit. But then you have to make the change in yourself to match that change, to be a consistent person. So what do? So you change the way you speak. You change the words that come out of your mouth. Your davening changes. The way you interact with other people begins to change. And then the way you interact with your parents changes. And then the next thing you know, you're a mensch. The next thing you know, you have B'nai Torah. That's how Torah changes you. And at the end of the day, you're quote unquote buying the proverbial house. That's how Torah changes you. It's a beautiful, beautiful process. And that's the message that I want to deliver here today, and in particular to the Talmidim of Yeshivat Netiv Aryeh, because that's the process. But what's the recipe? What are the ingredients? Well, I think what happens is you start with a group of teenage boys. You add in an outstanding hanhala, outstanding rabbeim and madrichim, mechanchim. You add in a dynamic, energetic, uncompromising Rosh Yeshiva who cares nothing for political correctness and just speaks the truth and ingrains that in his Talmidim. You put them in a base medrash with an Adam Gadol, like Rav Yaakov Katz, Shlita. You expose them to Rav Nebenthal, who's a living, breathing Sefer Torah. You put that all in an environment where, as Rabina says many, many times, and we hear this, everything is done for the boys. You put in that environment. Of course, you have to spice it up. You have to add in the Tiyulim, the Ahavat Haaretz. You have to throw in a green dragon costume, of course, some soup on Wednesday nights, a couple pair of colorful Converse sneakers. You throw in Mike Allione, of course, who's one of my favorites, General Sat, who's in charge of the Gashmias, who we have a particular Hakaras HaTov to. Some Thursday afternoon shuk schlepping, lighting the menorah at the Kotel, Purim and Sderot, and of course, Rav Mays knows that nothing is complete without an old rock hammer, darn near worn down to the nub. And you take all of that and you put it less than 100 feet away from the holiest place in the world. And that's your recipe for Menschlichkeit. That's your recipe for B'nai Torah. And that's what we see here today in this culmination of a unprecedented year of a Siyum, a Maseches Megillah, and that is Netiv Aryeh. So on behalf of my wife, and I really believe that I speak on behalf of all the parents, not just the parents that are on this call, and not just the parents that have children and sons in Netiv Aryeh now, but the past parents, because I can tell you from experience, the Netiv Aryeh experience lasts beyond your time in the yeshiva. A special Hakaras HaTov that my wife and I have to Rav Ron and Rav Shaloni for the kesher that they keep with my older son, Sam, who's no longer in the yeshiva. And again, on behalf of all the parents, I wish a mazel tov to all the Messiahim. I say thank you to the Rosh Yeshiva, to the Rabbanim, to the Rabbeim. The Hakaras HaTov cannot be expressed in mere words. I say mazel tov, I say yasher koach, continued hatzlacha, and continued bracha. And I hope to once again very soon be standing there, as Rabina Shlita says, across from the Holy of Holies in the yeshiva with that Kol Torah. I wish everyone a wonderful, wonderful day and mazel tov.